Paramesham idyam tam Ramakrishnam shirasa namama. We salute that manifestation of God, the Supreme Lord Himself, the most worshipful Sri Ramakrishna, who is infinite by nature and of infinite manifestations, stainless, eternal, who took on human form out of compassion for all. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So first let me express my deep gratitude to Swami Sarvastanandaji Maharaj. I've known him for some years now. I met him in India. He kindly invited me to Rajkot, where I met other people that have continued to be friends and associates, like Dattatreya Velankar, who is just with us in France. And it's a great pleasure to be at this wonderful center, which he now heads. I have only been here 3 times in my life, though I've traveled a lot. I've been 4 times to England, but once when I was a student, teenage student, 3 times to the center here, once in 1981 at Christmas time with Swami Bhavyanandaji. Then I came back this last December, almost a year ago, for the memorial of our dear Swami Tripuranandaji. And so this is my 3rd visit, and I'm very delighted to be here. And I am particularly delighted to be able to speak on the topic of our tradition, the Ramakrishna tradition, our spiritual tradition, spiritual practice, to devotees of the tradition. We need, as a movement, not each individual in the movement, but as a movement, we need to be able to speak to the world at large, to ordinary people, men and women on the street, children. We need to have the capacity as a movement, again, and not every individual is called upon to do this, but we need to be able to speak in ordinary terms to ordinary people. We need to be able to speak to academia. Again, not each one of us is academic, but as a movement, we need to be able to communicate with academia. We need to be able to communicate with thought leaders of the world as a movement. We need to be able to communicate with other religions, a field that I have worked in for many, many years, or all over the world. Last time I counted, and now it's more, I've traveled to 35 countries. Most of that, almost the great majority of that, in Vedanta work, a little bit when I was a student before Vedanta. Working largely in the field of interreligious work. So we need to be able to speak to all types of people, communicate our message to all types of people, not just to our own devotees. And yet, it's a delight to have the opportunity to speak to the community of devotees about the things that are most sacred to us. There's certain things that we share with a common person on the street if we have a chance to share something. Certain things that we share with academia, certain things we might share with thought leaders of the world if we have that opportunity. Certain things we might share in the communion of different religious traditions together. But there are things that we can share with our own devotees, the followers of our tradition, which don't come into these other conversations. So it's a delight to be able to speak in a dedicated way, in a concentrated way, about these things that are so meaningful to us. So my topic today is the tradition of meditation and Japa in the Ramakrishna tradition. And I want to start by saying something about initiation, because initiation, of course, is the way that we get into the practice of japa. There are people who do take a mantra from a book, And I'm not one of those who says that that's dangerous. There's some people who say, oh, you shouldn't do that. You'll go crazy. It's dangerous. It'll drive you mad. No, I've known many people who do it. It doesn't drive them mad. But there's a reason why people take an initiation to get a mantra. There's a good reason for getting a mantra through initiation. So first, let me say a word about that, and then what the purpose of initiation is. The difference between a mantra that I select on my own because I read it in a book and I liked it, I like the sound of it, or maybe I liked something I read about Shiva, and so I like Om Namah Shivaya or something like that, so I repeat it. One of the problems with that is, not the only, but one of the problems is that I selected it and I practiced it maybe for a few months, maybe for a few years. But the time comes when I feel that I'm not getting anywhere fast. Maybe I should have picked another mantra because I picked it. I'm the one who took it. So there's no higher authority than myself. And with spiritual practice, I begin to realize just what a fool I actually am and how little spiritual understanding I really have. And so then I begin to realize, well, why should I trust something that I chose? My choosing a mantra doesn't give authority to my choice. It just means for some reason, God knows why, I liked it, I chose it, and now I practice it, but who knows whether it's working or whatever. So that's the first problem with it. Again, it's not a bad thing. If you have a mantra that you've chosen and you do it, it's better than doing nothing. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a harmful thing. It's just that in time, you'll begin to doubt your own choice. That's inevitable. Second thing is that the tradition says, and experience of many great souls confirms, that in the process of legitimate initiation from an authorized person who has received the tradition, empowered to give initiation, that receiving a mantra is not just receiving a sound. There is a connection made between the devotee and the reality. The initiation is real. It's not a formality that, well, in our tradition, we sprinkle people with water, and we don't know why we do it, but we just sprinkle people with water, and so it's something we do. No, it's not like that. It's not something that we do. In our tradition, we give initiation, so we don't know why, but we give it. No, it's not like that. It's a living tradition. It's a living process. It's something which has power. It's something which touches the deepest part of our being. So the two main reasons for getting a mantra from initiation are, one, how am I to know what I should choose and how I should practice it? Number two is that if I choose it, I'm just getting a sound from a book. I'm not getting something which is empowered by a tradition, which has been empowered by many, many people who have repeated it. And more importantly, a mantra which has been empowered by a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna himself, who transmitted the mantras given in our tradition to the Holy Mother, who then taught them to others in our tradition, and it's passed on from guru to disciple in succession in that way. So now let me mention the four purposes of initiation. And let me say, before I do that this is my analysis of the four purposes of initiation. If you ask another Swami or someone else about the purposes of initiation, they may describe it somewhat differently. So mine is not an absolute statement of final authority that this is what it is and it's nothing else. But these are the four purposes of initiation, which I received from one of my teachers, and which has always been true to my experience and my understanding, and so I give it to you. First purpose of initiation is that we become members of a spiritual tradition. If you're a general spiritual seeker, which is fine, many people are, and many people at least start as general spiritual seekers, that I there must be a spiritual reality. I want to find it. And so I look in different traditions, and I'm just interested in spirituality. I'm interested in higher experience, however it comes. I'm not tied to a tradition. That's an important stage for many of us, especially in the modern world. Not long ago in history, people were born into a tradition, and that's where you stayed. There was not a choice of it, except in Hinduism, where you had a choice of sampradayas, so a choice of different traditions within Hinduism, but still it was the Hindu tradition. Nowadays, all traditions practically are open to us, and you can go to a spiritual bookstore and find books on any tradition in the world, and you can go to seminars and find teachers from any tradition in the world. So for many, an important stage in the beginning of spiritual life is finding a tradition. But once we find a tradition that we like, there comes the point where some commitment to the tradition is important, because we can't go deep without, as Sri Ramakrishna would say, using his example, stretching it a little bit, we can't go deep, we can't get water from a well unless we continue digging in the same hole. And so a time comes when we realize, okay, I've searched, I've studied different traditions, I've looked at different things, but this is what I keep coming back to, and this is where I want to concentrate. And so initiation in the Ramakrishna tradition means that you have decided that this is where I want to dig for water. This is where, for whatever reason, personal or whatever, I've decided that I want to find the water of God, the water of spiritual experience, the living water here. And so initiation ties us to a tradition. It makes us members of a tradition in a special way. In that sense, it is similar to all other religious traditions, which, for instance, in the Christian tradition, have baptism. In Buddhism, you have taking refuge in the three jewels. Every tradition has a moment of commitment to the tradition. And that's because without commitment, we can't dig deeply. We'll always be thinking, well, maybe there's better chance of getting water over there or over there. So at some point, we have to say, no, this is where I'm going to dig. So take as long as you want to find that place, but eventually you'll have to find it. So becoming a member of a spiritual tradition is, for many modern people, a scary thing, because one thing that the modern world does not promote is commitment. Just 50 years ago, society in Europe and America and England, Great Britain, and around the world emphasized various types of commitment. For instance, if you got a job at a particular place, or business or factory or whatever, you committed yourself to the business, and the business committed itself to you. If you worked there for a lifetime, then they would take care of your education, the education of your children, your medical care, and so forth. You were fixed because you committed yourself to them, they committed yourself to you. There's no such idea of commitment in general in the business world today. I don't know in England, but in America, people are advised, college graduates are advised, not only that you'll have to change jobs a number of times in your life, you'll probably have to change profession 4 times in your life. That's the current advice given to graduates of universities now, that you'll have to change profession probably 4 times in your lifetime. So there's no commitment in business. Commitment to family, commitment to other things is much loosened. There are good aspects of that. I don't deny that. I'm not saying that we should go back to the old way of doing things. No, there were problems with the old way of doing things too. But one of the things that we have lost with our much valued and properly valued liberalism is the value of commitment. Somehow we have to get that back, because it's through commitment that depth comes in life, whatever it is that we commit ourselves to. So today, society doesn't promote commitment, so we have to commit ourselves. Society doesn't commit us. We have to commit ourselves. And so entering into a spiritual tradition is one of the commitments that is very important in spiritual life. If you have, when you're a child, or even when you're a grown-up, you become very close to another family, and perhaps you've lost your own family, and the family you have become very close to says that we want to adopt you into our family. And there are legal processes for adoption, even adoption of an adult. What to speak of children? You can be legally adopted into a family. If you are legally adopted, then you have certain legal rights. You have rights of inheritance and so forth. The wealth of the family becomes partly yours by legal right. When you are committed to a spiritual tradition, the wealth of that tradition becomes part of your wealth. It's open to you in a particular way. In the Ramakrishna tradition, that is not seen as something exclusive. Ramakrishna and his teachings and his wealth is open to the whole world, people everywhere. Swami Vivekananda always insisted that we had to remember that Sri Ramakrishna had come for everyone, not just for an institution or just for a particular group of people. But at the same time, it's true that through a commitment to the tradition of Sri Ramakrishna, the wealth of that tradition becomes open to you in a special way, not because of the exclusivity of the tradition, but because of an openness that comes in you. You have opened yourself to the tradition and allowed the wealth of the tradition to begin to penetrate you. So again, the first purpose of initiation is commitment to a spiritual tradition. You become a member of the spiritual tradition, and the wealth of that tradition begins to come to you in a way that it didn't before you made that commitment. Let me say one more thing before I go to the next point, the second purpose, and that is that one of the great values of the Ramakrishna tradition to me, I obviously was not born into the Ramakrishna tradition. There are some Westerners now who are born into the Ramakrishna tradition, but it's still rare. So you see someone like me, and you can be pretty sure that I was not born into this. I came to it at a certain time. I joined when I was 19. And one of the great joys for me in discovering this tradition was that it was not a narrow tradition. I was not committing myself to one narrow set of beliefs where I had to say, I believe in this, and I don't believe in these other things or these other things in order to belong to the Ramakrishna tradition. The Ramakrishna tradition accepts all traditions, all religious traditions. And therefore, the wealth of the world's religious traditions is also open to us. Now, the institutions guiding other religious traditions may not agree with that, but at the same time, many of us have found that through Sri Ramakrishna, through beginning to understand him, his life and his teachings, then when we begin to look at the wealth of other religious traditions, then that becomes open to us in a way that it hadn't been before. We begin to understand things at a level and at a depth that we couldn't understand before. So by committing ourselves to the Ramakrishna tradition, we're not committing ourselves to a narrow set of beliefs and practices that exclude us from everything else and everyone else. We're opening ourselves to a tradition which opens a spirituality to us in all of its manifestations. So a second purpose of initiation is that it's a purification. That's why in the tradition, until one has received initiation, generally one is not allowed to do the worship in the shrine. One is not allowed to prepare the food offerings for the shrine, certain things that one is not allowed to do. Again, not because of exclusion, but because of the idea that through the process of initiation, there's a mental, spiritual, and even physical purification that comes. In that also, it's similar to the idea of Christian baptism. And baptism, the idea is that the image of God in which you're created, that has become clouded or stained by sin, and through baptism, it is partially cleansed. So, of course, that is different from our way of thinking of it, but it's similar in the sense that it's a purification. And so initiation is a purification. through initiation, one is purified in a special way. And connecting this to the previous point of becoming a member of or committing to a spiritual tradition. In the process of initiation, one offers oneself to Sri Ramakrishna. And through that, it's considered, again, not just a ritual. It's considered not just going through the motions of something because I want to be initiated and I want to join the club. So these are the motions I have to go through. So I'll get it done. And then I'll be a member of the club and I don't have to think about it again. No, it's considered that these things are real and they have real power. In the process of initiation, you offer yourself to Sri Ramakrishna. You offer your karma to Sri Ramakrishna. And it's considered that from that time forward, Sri Ramakrishna is helping you with the working out of your karma. All of us have to face karma. Karma is one of the universal laws stated in Hinduism, and one of the more widely known and widely accepted principles of Hinduism. Everybody speaks nowadays about karma in all different traditions. People speak about karma, and so it's become a widely accepted general idea. But we all have karma. We all have to face our karma. Our karma brings up the various experiences we have to face in life. But through initiation, we're no longer alone in facing our karma. Through initiation, Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda, they help us through our karma. They help us to face our karma. They help us to work it out. And so that's a great benefit in life, that we're no longer alone in that sense in the face of the vicissitudes of life's experiences. So joining a tradition, becoming a member of a tradition, purification. A third purpose of meditation, of initiation, is that the Guru gives us meditation instructions. This is the way that you should proceed in your meditation. Through that, we get a process of practice, which again, I can read books, I can get all kinds of ideas from books and do that. And again, that's not harmful. It's just that it's not enough. Because again, if I pick out practices that I like and just do it because I like it, after a while I think, well, maybe I should have chosen something else. But when we get to practices from the teacher, then I know that this is what I'm to practice every day. And so it removes a doubt, and it commits me to a form of practice that I continue to do. Now, there are in every person that receives the same instructions from the same teacher, there'll be differences in the way that we interpret, the difference in the way we understand, a difference in the way that we practice. And through our reading and practice and study and hearing teachings and so forth, we understand things with growing depth, and we adjust the way that we understand these instructions, but yet it's still these instructions that we follow. And so we begin to go deep with them. What I just said was to indicate that this also is not exclusive. As I will share with you over today and tomorrow, there are several ways of practicing japa, all of which are good. And none of these ways of practicing japa are contrary to a guru's instruction. But the guru's instruction is to be followed for the method of meditation. But with our growing understanding, we begin to see greater depth and greater wealth of ways in which to approach it. And so this also is not exclusive. It doesn't mean that I'm limited to 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll never see anything else. No, you do 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 in time begin to become multiplied just in their depth. And you find that the various spiritual possibilities of practice are embedded in these simple instructions. So third is we get initiation instruction. And fourth is what we generally think of as the real purpose of meditation. And so it is a very important part of initiation, just not the sole purpose. and that is, in initiation in our tradition, one receives a mantra, and through the mantra, one receives an impulse of spiritual power. I remember when I went to India. I joined the order when I was 19. I was very young, it's true. People at the time told me I was too young to know what I was doing. It's true. I was too young to know what I was doing. And luckily, I stumbled into the right place. Even if I didn't know what I was doing, Sri Ramakrishna knew what I was doing, and that was enough. So I've stayed. But I went to India in 1971, the beginning of 71, while I was still just 20 years old, and got initiation. And so I had read some books by that time, like the Eternal Companion about Swami Brahmananda, who emphasized Japa a great deal, and the life of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda. And so I was very inspired by all of it, and incredibly inspired by the idea of getting initiation. So when the day came when I was to get initiation from the president of the order, a disciple of the Holy Mother herself, who had known many of the direct disciples in the early days of the order, a very great Swami and a very powerful Swami. So I'm getting initiation from him. It was like I was so excited, and so excited about receiving a mantra from this man, that my excitement was to the point where I was ready at any moment to pass out. Luckily, I didn't. I managed to keep myself conscious and receive the mantra. But nothing extraordinary happened in receiving the mantra. And so the impulse of power is not something that the Guru says the mantra, and suddenly you feel this tremendous the impulse of power, and the walls begin to melt away, and you see this great light, and you begin to float on a cloud and so forth. Lotuses begin to spring up from the ground. No, it's not like that. You receive the mantra and just humbly accept it. But know that within that mantra is great power, tremendous power. That is the saving power. In receiving the mantra, you have received the divine itself. You've received God himself, herself. You've received the divine. It's a tremendous gift. So don't expect the lights to start flashing and all of that. It is through years of practice that the power of the mantra is manifested. Don't worry about time. When you receive the mantra, it takes time to be able to do this, but after receiving the mantra, what you want to be able to do with time is to forget time. Forget time. We all think after receiving a mantra, we practice for a while and we think, I don't feel anything. I should be feeling something, but I don't feel anything. And we go on practicing for more time and we think, I don't feel anything. And it's becoming mechanical. I don't feel anything. Forget about that. Forget about time. Forget about when is something going to happen? Am I doing something wrong? Go on repeating the mantra, because the mantra has the power of the divine in it. But it's working in the early stages on our unconscious minds, where all of the experiences of many past lives are there. All of the trash of our experiences, our various lives is there. And that the mantra is working on all of that. And that takes time. So we're extremely blessed if a point comes in our spiritual life where we can say genuinely that whether it happens in this life or whether it takes 100 lifetimes, I don't care. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. Time doesn't matter, because now I have God. I have the divine being itself right here. The mantra is not an ordinary sound. The mantra is, in human speech, when the Guru gives you the mantra, he's giving a divine sound reflected in human speech. When Sri Ramakrishna realized these mantras in superconscious samadhi, he didn't hear somebody speaking with physical vocal cords saying these words as words. He realized a reality which expresses itself in sound. And that sound is a very high spiritual sound, which, coming down into human speech, vaikari, expressed speech, is put into these letters. So when the mantra awakens, one will recognize that sound as this is what the Guru gave me. It's the same, but it's not the same. What the Guru gave me was the spoken word, but it was tied to this. This is where it was taking me because it was tied to this. This is what it was a manifestation of. It's like to take the example of Om. Many years ago, when I was it was at the time when I was a brahmachari turning into a sannyasi. So I was both with the Swami as a brahmachari and then as a young sannyasi. I had the great benefit of working in India in the Himalayas with a Swami who was a great yogi. And at that time, he had begun to hear the sound of Om spontaneously rising from within and from without throughout the universe. And he would tell me about his experience. And so Om is a mantra, the sacred mantra, the most universal symbol within Hinduism. The Gayatri mantra is the most universal prayer in Hinduism and the most basic prayer in Hinduism. Not basic in the sense of low, it's a very high prayer, but the most basic spiritual urge. But Om is the most universal symbol. And Om is the sound of the Anahata Dhvani. It's the original mantra out of which all mantras come, the mother of all mantras. And so we say Om in human speech. But as I learned from this Swami, when you hear Om, you recognize this is Om, but it's not heard as human speech. It's heard as a deeply spiritual sound, which is giving birth to the universe itself every moment, giving birth to everything here, giving birth to me and all beings in the universe itself. A sound which is so refined and so high, he said that in trying to describe it, all he could come up with was the sound of a silver bell, because not that a silver bell actually sounds that great. That's why they don't make bells out of silver, but because the sound was so pure, and the sound was so elevated, the sound was so extraordinary, and a sound out of which the universe itself is coming. So this is not, when I say Om, nothing happens. There's no universe coming out of that. I don't see anything happening in front of me when I say Om, but when I hear the real Om, I know that's what Om means. This is Om, because the two are intrinsically connected. That's why we say Om, that's why we repeat it. But that is a deeply spiritual sound. And so in receiving the mantra, we are receiving a sound which comes from the superconscious state itself, and which has the power to take us to the superconscious state itself. Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi, she didn't know Sanskrit, and so that should be of great consolation to many people, that she was the Divine Mother herself and one of the great spiritual luminaries of world history, not just of recent times, but of world history, one of the great spiritual luminaries of the whole world ever. And yet she didn't know Sanskrit, so that gives many people hope. but she did know a few Sanskrit sayings. And one that she used to often repeat was Japat Siddhi. Japat Siddhi. From Japa, Japat, out of Japa, from doing Japa, Siddhi comes perfection. Siddhi, perfection. From Japa, perfection, or from Japa comes perfection. So she would tell people, just by doing Japa, you'll get everything. You'll get everything. Now, to some people, that sounds like, well, that's too cheap. The great rishis who practiced all kinds of austerities and things, they didn't get it just by saying Om, 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 like that all day. They had to do something. They had to do something more than that. Well, no, as you find, if you practice Japa, that if you really practice it, in time, it will consume everything. Your whole life will be consumed by Japa. Japa will become your very being. Japa will become everything. In time, what we want is for Swami Atmarupananda, his personality, his personal history, his body, his mind, the universe itself to dissolve into the mantra. And there's nothing but the mantra, which is realized as the transcendent reality itself. Let me stop here on this point to speak to a doubt that many people have. People sometimes think that, well, in getting a mantra, there are a number of different mantras. And in a particular tradition like the Ramakrishna tradition, there's several mantras. But each one pertains to an aspect of God, like the Ramakrishna mantra or the Sarada Devi mantra. I don't want an aspect of God. I want the whole thing. Why should I just get one little part of God? I want everything. I don't want a part of God. We think that way because of our present experience. If I'm sitting here now, Nitesh here can't sit in the chair unless he pulls me out of it, or unless I get up and tell him to sit, because of mutual exclusion. If I'm occupying a space, he can't occupy the same space. I'm one person, individual, he's another person. I have my thoughts, he has his thoughts. I occupy my space, he occupies his space. I have my personal history, he has his personal history. And so everything here operates on the principle of mutual exclusion. If I'm here, no one else can be here at the same time. But at the spiritual level, that's not the principle at all. Every genuine mantra, every genuine spiritual mantra is the whole of reality. And so if you realize the Ramakrishna mantra, you have realized the divine being itself. Because there it's not mutual exclusion. There, every aspect of the divine is the same divine. That's part of Ramakrishna's revelation, part of his teaching, an essential part of his teaching. So we should never think that, well, by getting a particular mantra, I'm just going to get a part of God, perhaps. No, you're getting the whole thing. That's the whole thing. That's reality itself. If you read a teacher like Ramana Maharshi, a great teacher of Advaita from the late 19th to the first half of the 20th century, a very popular teacher and a very great teacher, a great Advaitin, who was always emphasizing the non-dualistic teaching, the knowledge of the Atman, and asking oneself the question, who am I? Seeking self-knowledge. So he always put emphasis on that. But if you read his teachings carefully, you find he gave a lot of instruction on japa as well, and devotional japa as we practice in our tradition. And he said, japa is reality itself. You should become japa. If you become japa, you'll realize that japa is the self, that is the Atman. Now that doesn't make rational sense, but it makes spiritual sense. It makes perfect spiritual sense. It doesn't make rational sense because the mind works on the level of common sense where there's mutual exclusion. But at the spiritual level, it makes perfect sense that reality is japa, he says. The self, the Atman is japa. So become japa, and that is reality itself. So again, the fourth purpose of initiation is to receive this impulse of divine power manifested through the mantra. So we'll stop at just a few minutes for a tea break, but let me say just a little bit more. These are the four purposes of initiation, and one gets initiation from a guru. In our tradition, the Ramakrishna tradition, the order is selective about who becomes a guru. You don't, in the Hindu tradition in general, because there's no hierarchy in the religion in general, there's no pope, there's no institution which represents Hinduism itself as a whole. Anyone can be a teacher. Any one of you could go out and start saying, well, I'm a teacher, I'll lead people to illumination, and I'll give whoever wants initiation. Even if you haven't received initiation yourself, you can say, well, I'm going to give initiation, and there's no one to stop you. So I often use a marketing term to describe Hinduism as a buyer beware tradition. Buyer beware means that there's not an institution in the tradition which guarantees what you're getting from whoever you go to. So anybody can set themselves up as a guru. So when you go to someone to accept initiation, to take initiation from them, first you want to be sure of the tradition which they come from. You want to be sure of the person. You want to be sure of the tradition that they come from. Because if in our tradition, the tradition itself is behind the people who give initiation to the disciples. and they have been given the power to give initiation. And so in other Hindu traditions, it's done differently, but that we want to be careful of, that we get initiation from an authorized guru. And in our tradition also, an important thing to understand is that Sri Ramakrishna is the guru of our tradition. We say in our jais, that we say at the arati time and in certain other times of the day, we say Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai to the Lord, the Maharaja, the Lord of all gurus, Sri Ramakrishna. So in our tradition, the guru is an instrument of Sri Ramakrishna. So one of the things that you see in popular Hinduism is the glorification of the guru. And that there's a good reason behind that, and there's an abuse of that also. That is, it often is the case that the guru in many Hindu groups becomes the value of the tradition, and everything is about the guru. Even the disciples are there mainly to glorify the guru, and everything is the guru. And then if you find that the guru is not who he presumed to be, then you feel that you've been deeply, deeply cheated. But even if the guru does turn out to be good, still in many groups, the guru himself becomes the value of the group. In our tradition, that's not the case. The human guru is highly valued, highly respected, because he is the instrument through which Sri Ramakrishna initiates us. But it's Sri Ramakrishna who initiates us. It's Sri Ramakrishna's power, which is transmitted to us through the human guru. And so all of us receiving initiation in this tradition, in one sense, have the same guru. That's why in our tradition, the human guru is respected, but not glorified as in other Hindu traditions. You don't see Swami Sarvastanandaji Maharaj being carried around the grounds on a palanquin with people fanning him with chamaras and so forth, and him holding up his hands and blessing everyone. No, there's no show, there's no pretension. There's no none of that. Some people might like that type of ceremony and excitement and so forth, but in the end, you'll find that has very little spiritual value, and it can be spiritually very dangerous at the same time. So in our tradition, you'll find that the gurus are simple. The gurus are not paraded in public, and as is the case in many Hindu traditions. So the guru in our tradition is Sri Ramakrishna himself, who gives us initiation through the human guru, who has been authorized by the authorities at Bellarmut to give initiation. And the guru gives a mantra which comes from Sri Ramakrishna himself through Holy Mother to us. So it's a great opportunity to receive initiation, a great value to receive initiation. And it's important for us either when we're receiving initiation or even years after we've received initiation, to understand what initiation really means and the value of it. Because, as I will say later when I get into the practice of Japa and so forth, Japa for a long time, it inevitably becomes mechanical. And so then we think, well, what's the use? I'm just going om, 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 om. Nothing's happening. I don't feel anything. It's just om, 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 om. I don't see the value in it. No, there is value. There is value. You read the teachings of the great souls like Swami Brahmananda, the Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, especially his passage on the mantra in Bhakti Yoga. It has great value, and the tradition is a living tradition. Sri Ramakrishna didn't live long ago. I myself knew a person, or I shouldn't say I knew her, I met her, spoke to her. in 1971. A woman who had lived with Sri Ramakrishna, served him, lived with the Holy Mother. I knew many people who were disciples of the Holy Mother, people who knew her, people who served her, many people. But I knew one person who had known Sri Ramakrishna, lived with him at Dakshineshwar, served him, carried his food to him. So he was that close to us, that I may be old, but I'm not that old. So if I knew someone who had known Sri Ramakrishna, then he's very close to us. I knew 5 people, including her, who had known Swami Vivekananda. And so they're that close to us. And so the power which they brought to earth is that close to us. So the very purpose of the incarnation's coming is to bring a new flowering of spirituality. And so this is a great time in the spiritual history of the world. It's a time when there are many obviously many forces working against the spiritual. Society has gone in quite a different direction. The institutions of society don't support spiritual ideals and so forth, even the good ones. They may not be directly against them, but they don't support them. And so there are many ways in which this is an unfortunate time spiritually, as far as the state of society, the state of our institutions, and so forth. But in another sense, it's a very fortunate time, because we're so close to the budding and flowering of that spiritual power which Sri Ramakrishna has brought to earth. So it's a time when we can go counter to the apparent stream of history right now, go back towards the source. But in time, we'll see that Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda came for the very purpose of changing the course of history, that history itself will begin to follow them. So we are at the forefront of that movement. And I don't say that for us to be egotistical about it, but for us to feel blessed because of the opportunity, that we are at the forefront of that movement in the change of the very direction of history. That was the very purpose of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda's coming, was to change the course of history, not just to come and teach a few people and sing and dance and then disappear and leave a few people around to carry on a tradition where people carry on some things that they do as they do them. No, it was to change the very course of the world, the course of world history. And that's happening now. It's just not visible on this social plane, but that's what's going on now. Swami Vivekananda himself said, and Sri Ramakrishna himself indicated. So with that, let me close this first session, and we'll come back at 4:30.